Hello, my creative friends. It's time to take another art break and check out these adorable little bunny bags. These are made with bags from the Dollar General store. And then I use some acrylic paint with just some simple acrylic paint styles. And then of course, at the end, I always like to add a little bit of scribbly bits with this. And I'm going to be using some colored pencils and a few other pencils to create all the whimsical character to these little bunnies. Now, if you'd like to paint along with me, but drawing's not your thing, I do have a sketchbook membership. That's where I have all the tracers inside of there. So you can easily do a trace and paint style painting. You can click the QR code right over there. That'll lead you right over there. It's very reasonably priced, and I so appreciate all those who have joined my membership and support my channel that way. Well, let's get started and create this fun little bunnies. It's a great way to take an art break. For those who are using the trace and paint option, you're going to want to copy off your tracer first and then transfer that image onto a piece of tracing paper. Once you have it traced, go ahead and turn it over. Use a pencil if you would like. Go over your lines with some dark graphite, or you can even use some transfer paper as well. But then flip your image back over. I like using a colored pencil to go on top of my lines to make sure I have them all traced. And then once you have them traced, you'll have your image and you'll be ready to paint. When using the tracer, you just want to start with the larger shapes. I'm going to be blocking in the white more or less like a color book style. The only thing I'm kind of taking notice of is that I want to brush the paint in the direction of that the fur would grow. That's just going to help me layer in a little bit of texture and have it going the right direction. After I have that first layer of white on, I'm going to switch my brushes up. I'm going to be using that children's brush that I purchased at Walmart. It's just kind of a scruffy brush. This is what I'm going to be using to create a shadow line around my little rabbit. I'm first dipping my brush in the white and then just tapping it in the gray off to the side there and blending in a shadow line. So I want to add shadows to the outside of my rabbit's face, to the right of each side of my eye. For the nose, I'm going to be adding a shadow down and around the bottom and just a tiny one above the area of the nose. I'm also going to be coming down and adding some of that shadow line on his body. So underneath that chin line, there would be a shadow. I'm going to add some shadow on the outside of his arms. And then where his two little paws have those lines on it for each individual toe, I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow line there. Now these shadow lines don't have to be perfect. I'm going to be layering on another coat, so I'm just putting in those basics right now. It's a layering process, so we build it slow as we go. There really is no right or wrong way to do this. You're basically layering in the paint and working as you go and building your layers that way. I want to give my piece a chance to dry. Because acrylic paint always dries a little darker, I need it to be dry so I can take a look at how dark my shadows might be. If I need to add a little bit more white, I can take my little scrubby brush and rub it over those shadow lines. I can soften that shadows easily by doing it this way. I can also brighten up the areas if I need to add just a little bit more highlight to bring that character to life. Again, this is just kind of playing with colors, scrubbing them on, and then seeing what you have. And oops, I did get a little bit of pink on my bunny. But you know, I kind of like that little bit of pink. And in the end, I kind of take a little bit of that pink and rub it just about everywhere. I liked that little blushed look underneath on his fur. So it was a happy accident. I'm going to give my piece another chance to dry so I can check my shadows and my highlights to see if I'm happy with them. That's the great thing about acrylic paint. You have a lot of play and you can always tweak it if you want to. Now to create the rich black of my eyes, I'm going to be using a round brush to paint the little ovals in. This rich black makes for a beautiful base, but the twinkle and the magic happens when you add the highlights, and that will happen once these eyes are dry. I'm choosing to use almost a rusty barn color of red for my ear base color and for the nose. This is just going to be a nice dark color to pop the rest of my lighter shades of pink on the top. If you're a member of my sketchbook membership, you'll get all the paint colors, and you can also purchase the standalone pattern for this bunny if you would like, so you would get the tracer and the paint colors that I use as well. You want to give that red just a little bit of time to dry, and then I'm going to be layering in a lighter shade of that pink and mixing a little bit of white in it as well. That darker base is just going to allow those really light colors to pop off and make a little bit of sparkle. One thing to keep in mind is that ear that is bent over, that underside there needs to be darker than the one that's straight up. So in the end, I want to just make sure that I have a darker color there than what I do on my other ear. It's just a small little detail, but it can make a big difference in your painting. I had to laugh. At this point, it almost looked like a little pig. Where I had those little dark holes with the darker paint popping through. You know, once you see something, you can't unsee it. So it made me kind of giggle where it kind of looked like a little pig. I'm going to let those pinks all dry, and then I'm going to come back in and add another layer of the pinks and the whites and just make those little areas pop. And I'm going to make sure I have a darker shadow line underneath that one little ear. I'm going to take another look at my shadows again in my white to see if I need to bump them up at all. I kind of fiddle with this a little bit, but it doesn't take very much time, and you might want to just tweak it a little bit if you would like to. I'm going to use a light blue color to create the little highlights at the bottom of his eyes. I'm just using a brown brush with a little watered down paint of that light blue and brushing it in the bottom. Now to add a little bit more dimension to this rabbit and the edge of my bag. I'm going to be using the floated water technique for this look. I'm going to dip my brush into clean water and then tap it on a paper towel until I see the shine gone. And then I'm going to dip just the corner of my brush into the paint and disperse it by rubbing back and forth on my palette. That'll drag it from being dark to light. An angle brush works perfect for this technique. I'm going to add that shadow all the way around the edge and around my bunny. That's going to make it look from being more of a 2D to adding that 3D quality and just help that bunny kind of just pop off the paper bag. Plus it adds a great area when I add all the little scribbly bits. That little dark edge just adds a little darker color to bring those little scribbly bits to life. If you feel like you need to soften some of those shadows around the bunny, use the heel of your brush, the pointed end with the sharp point. That's considered the toe, but that other end is considered the heel. Use that heel of your brush and kind of soften those little areas of shadow lines if you feel like you need to kind of soften them so they don't look too much like a band all the way around your little rabbit. Here I'm coming back in with more white, just bouncing that color up a little bit more. Like I said, it's a dance in between adding more, taking off some, and I needed to add just a tiny bit more bright, and I wanted to use that little scrubby brush to come out past my rabbit and add a little bit of fluff. I need to add the final twinkles to the inside of the eyes, and I'm going to be using a stylus for this. I'm going to be dotting in some highlights on the left side of each eye. If you put the highlights on the left side of one eye, you need to do the same on the other, on the left side. That way your eyes will look balanced and not so wonky. If you put them on the opposite sides, they do look a little wonky. Now let's go ahead and add those blush cheeks. I'm just using some of that light pink color that I had used in the ears, and I'm using a soft nylon scrubby brush, and first I scrub it on my palette, but I always rub it in my hand, and if it feels dry, I know I have enough paint removed, and I can go ahead and scruff in those little pretty pink cheeks. If you're using the tracer, this time you can go ahead and lay it back down, and then you can trace over those small little details if you would like. His muzzle, his teeth, the little lines or the little triangle spots where you're going to be adding those whiskers, that can be helpful. I'm going to brush in some bright white for his teeth. I'm going to water down just a little bit of gray and add a shadow underneath his teeth. Around the top of his head, I added a little bit more shadow line there. That's just another way that you can add some shadowing, is to water down your paint, almost like watercolor, and add in a few little bits of shadowing if you would like to add just a tiny bit of subtle shadows. Now that the acrylic painting is done, I'm going to move right on into adding the whimsical scribbly bits. I like to use color pencil for this step. I like using the brighter colors for this, so I just picked a bunch of almost like Easter colors. So the light blues, some plums, and some purples. And for the black lines for around his eyes, I'm going back to my Kimberly 9XXB pencil to add those really rich quality of the eyelashes and some little scribbly bits at the top of his eyes to add a little bit more character. I also use it to draw in my eyebrows. I like using a pencil better than using a paintbrush. I just feel like I have a little bit more control. But you could do it in paint as well. If you feel more confident using a paintbrush, go ahead and use a paintbrush. This is just the fun little details. Add as much as you like, or you really don't have to do it at all either. If you're happy with how your bunny looks with just acrylic paint, you can leave it that way. But I love to add all the whimsical characters, so I'm going to be adding some Easter colors of oranges and pinks and purples all the way throughout my little rabbit. I'm also going to get my Sharpie little marker, my China marker. That's just a different shade of white. It's a little bit more glossy and almost like a colored crayon look. You want to add it towards the end because it won't receive anything over the top very well. And then to add all of the little fuzzy whimsical bits, that's when I'm going to be using my chalk pencil. General's Pastel Chalk Pencil in white works perfect to add all those little fuzzy little bits around this little bunny. He's really coming to life, and I love that little fuzzy look that you can get with the chalk pencil. Instead of using black for the muzzle and for around his teeth and around my outside of my bunny too, I use a dark brown pencil instead of using black. The black is a little bit more darker and more severe, so I thought the brown was a better color to use. Plus, I had floated that brown color around the outside of the rabbit, so it just kind of tied it all together. I'm using my pencil very loosely, not a lot of structure, and I want that real loose line work to create that whimsical character for this little guy. I thought by adding just a tiny bit of dark purple looked great, but I also wanted to add some of the violet, so I got my violet out and I added that little touch of violet onto his nose, onto the inside of his ears, and I also went around the outside and created a few little whimsical lines in those areas too, and those little fuzzy bits, just adding the little purple. Get as creative as you like, have fun with this step, make this little project your own. This is just a fun little bag. You could give it to someone special, or you could just put some tissue paper in it and have it out in your house and display it as a fun little Easter decor piece. To create the interest around the edges, I just used little simple lines going back and forth, and just using a variety of the colors that I had used in my bunny, I used that on the outside as well. I decided to use my chalk pencil to write the words Happy Easter on there. I like that chalkboard look over top of this little paper sack. And I also added some little polka dots using this chalk pencil as well. So I did little circles and then just loosely colored them in. But because I was using all of my colored pencils and the chalk pencils, I need to put a clear coat over the top. And I'm just going to be using the Rust-Oleum clear coat and just give it at least one coat, or maybe two if you would like. And that should clear it up and it should be good to go. If you'd like to explore my sketchbook membership or the standalone pattern for this little bunny, go ahead and click this QR code and it'll take you right over to my Ko-fi shop. If you're new to my channel and you like doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It really does help YouTube push my videos out there. If you enjoyed this video, perhaps you might enjoy this playlist. Well, thanks for joining me, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again, and perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.